Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor from, yes, it is indeed Mardi Gras time at New Orleans. That's right. In the immortal words of the great song, because it's Mardi Gras time. Everybody's having fun. And we are, thank you, because we didn't have one last year, so we're looking forward to this one. As always, I'm joined by Rocky Messing, still in Israel, but about to get ready to come back stateside. Yeah.
For another week, and looking forward to my first business trip. I've traveled plenty since COVID started, but this is going to be my first business related trip for the past 2 years. So
yeah, and I haven't seen you in person in that time. I had my first trip last week. I went to San Diego to speak at the ESI Forum, which is a monthly meeting that Browning Marion had put together years and years ago. They asked me to come out because it was the first one that they did in 2 years.
Right.
So yeah, things are starting to pick up, and
I saw some good publicity on that. It looked like everyone had a good time. So
yeah, and you are. I know you are. I'm not going to say presume, but I know you're heading to Legal Week, as am I, and as I presume will be our guest, who we're really delighted to have with us today. Some people were delighted to have, but Bob, we're really delighted to have.
He says that with true enthusiasm.
That's right. Somebody we really like. Some people were not
if it's
that wild
worth
about.
Missing Mardi Gras for, that's good, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Bob Ambrogi, unless you've been living under a rock in the legal technology space for the last 20 years, you know who Bob. Although many people may not know what you look like. They may read what you have every day and never have seen you in person, Bob. But Bob is, and now sit back. Bob asked if we really, when I set the appointment for this, it was for 90 minutes, and I do that in case we go long. And that's because some people I have to read their background, which is
we're gonna just sit back, relax, and
buckle up, folks. It's going to get a little bumpy.
Bob, it's okay. You and I don't have to talk for the rest of the time. Tom will just read your bio.
That's right. Yeah, right. You guys, if you want to get coffee, now's a good time.
Can I just come back in a while, or?
Bob Ambrogi is a lawyer and journalist, writing and speaking about legal technology and innovation for more than 2 decades. 2 decades? Is that even accurate, Bob? Isn't it closer to 3 now?
More than 2
decades. Way more than 2 decades.
More than a
year.
year.
Up there.
I got to remember that. Yeah,
that's critical. That more than is critical.
He currently writes the award-winning blog Law Sites, which I recommend to everybody. That's my first stop in the morning after the coffee machine. He's a columnist for Above the Law, hosts the podcast about legal innovation called Law Next, and then the weekly Legal Tech Journalist Roundtable, which is a great one, the Legal Tech Week every Friday. Is that correct?
Every Friday, yep.
Yeah, and most recently just launched, I believe, last week, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more, the Law Next Legal Technology Directory.
Absolutely.
Bob, however, is not restricted to just these current activities. He's been a legal bon vivant for many years. In 1994, he founded the first.
Now I have to Google bon vivant.
Yeah. I was wondering if you're going to catch that. The first internet newsletter for lawyers, legal.online. Is that correct, Bob?
That is absolutely correct. There's a story I can tell you about that if you want, but
go for it. Yes, please.
Well, only because way back, this is back in 1993 or
right?
4.
Yeah.
And, the web had just started this was early, the web was 92. And
so you and Al Gore were like this, making plans.
I was writing a column already, did a syndicated column about the internet. And I had a publisher approach me about producing a newsletter, which was a print newsletter, because no lawyers were on the internet. At that point.
Yeah.
We kind of rushed to put it together, and we made our debut at the American Association of Law Libraries conference in whatever that was, 94 or something like that. Also there at the conference was Andy Adkins, who was debuting his internet newsletter for lawyers. I forget who he was doing it with, another guy. But we beat him. Our first issue came out, I think it was about 3 weeks before his did. So I get the claim first, but Andy was right there. And for years, it was a source of humor between the two of us.
There you go. Well, you also, a couple of other notable, I'm sorry, Rocky, let me just, I need to get these out because I really want people to know Well, I want people to understand how long he's been doing this and the depth of some of the things he's done. For 15 years, 1999 to 2013, you wrote the Web Watch column for what was then Law Technology News, which is how I met you. I met you through Monica Bay.
Monica, I think the first time we met each other was out in Seattle.
I was just going to say at the famous Red Door restaurant down Post Alley in Seattle. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
In 2017, Bob received, this was a great honor, the Yankee Quill Award for Journalism from the Academy of New England Journalists. A high recognition indeed. And also during that time period, for about 18 years or so, you were co-host of the award-winning podcast Lawyer to Lawyer, which was at some point it was the longest running legal podcast that was out there. I don't know if somebody else
probably still is, because they're still doing it. I don't do it anymore, but Craig Williams still runs it. So it's by far, it's got to be the longest running legal podcast.
Yep. And at some point in there, you were also president of an organization that's dear to my heart. I belong to the American Bar Foundation. You were past president. You are a past president of the Massachusetts Bar Foundation. Bar foundations, of course, do a ton of work for those of us who aren't in the upper echelon of legal technology, shall we say.
That's right.
The folks who need it the most.
Don't forget about the fact that, Bob is actually a lawyer also.
I think I said at the beginning, he's a lawyer and a journalist, but the lawyer part. So that's my first question for you, Bob. You live in Massachusetts.
Wasn't that all I had to do was hear my introduction?
That's it. We're done. Right. We're done. Good. Just pose and smile and we're done now. That's our 45 minutes are up. I know that you live on the North Shore of Boston, right? The home of many legal technology mavens.
Jared Correa.
Let's see, Don Swanson of 5 Star Legal lives up your way.
David Horrigan's up there.
David Horrigan is up there. Isn't Shannon Capone Kirk? Doesn't she live up your way? I don't know.
But Jared, do you know Jared Correa? He lives right
near.
Sure.
Yeah. I did not know he lived up there. Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. And
Don
I saw in your bio
annual get together anyway, at least for lunch, because he splits his time. He's like a
California
guy.
Yes. He's
here in the nice weather and there in the nice weather.
Right.
You went to Boston College Law School, and as we affectionately refer to it as Massachusetts native, you went to ZooMass in Amherst for your undergraduate degree.
I did.
How did you get into? Are you a Massachusetts native? Is my first question, part one, and part two. How did you get, after all that legal training, how did you get into all the stuff we just talked about? Legal and journalism.
And technology.
Yeah. So, let me start at kindergarten.
Yes, please.
I am a Massachusetts native. Always lived in Massachusetts, except 8 years I spent living in the Caribbean, practicing law down there. I had a law office in the Virgin Islands for a while. Back before Tom Bolt was somebody.
And you gave that up to come back to
the cold
wilds of northern.
It came down to a choice between the Caribbean and my wife, and I chose.
Oh, there you go. Say no more.
We can debate whether that was the right choice, but I chose.
Of course it was. And actually, if I could interject a personal note, Bob, you after Gail died, you wrote the most touching memory of her that really I came across during that time, and I wanted to thank you personally for that. It was a great piece. Anybody who hasn't read it, I just if you want to get a sense of what Gail was like, Bob really captured it. So thanks so much for that.
She's still looking over your shoulder there, Tom. So
trust me, I believe that. Yeah. So
I mean, someone's got to make sure Tom's behaving. That's the bottom line.
That was never her job.
I don't think I would assign
your
Gail
behavior.
with that task.
That was definitely not in Gail's job description. Make sure Tom's behaving.
That's true.
So anyway, okay, we digress. Journalism. So you grew up in Massachusetts, in the Boston area?
In Western Mass.
Western Mass. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. But so I had always So journalism was always my thing. That's what I wanted to be. Growing up, I wanted to be a journalist, or I wanted to actually be the great American novelist, and I wanted to be the next Ernest Hemingway or something.
Don't we all? Yeah.
For the day job, I wanted to be a journalist. And I went to UMass. I was a journalism major at UMass. I was did a lot of work in journalism. Used to write. You may remember, Tom, because I know you've got Massachusetts roots. A alternative paper back in the day called the Valley Advocate out in Western Mass. I used to write for them a lot.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I actually I was the editor of a little community newspaper out in Western Mass for a while, even after I graduated from college. But I wasn't making any money. And
amazing
minor detail.
And I decided I was going to go back and get a master's degree in journalism to try and move my career forward. And I went back to my undergrad advisor, and talked to him about it. And he said, "Don't get a master's degree." He said, you know how to report, the stuff they're going to teach you at journalism school. He said, "Get a degree that's going to teach you something about the world." And I'm like, "What do you suggest?" And he said, "If I were you, I'd go to law school." And he explained why, and it made a lot of sense. And I had never thought about law school. This was after college already, but I went to law school, and then I, even during law school, I was the editor of our law school newspaper, and I kept doing a lot of writing. But then I kind of got sucked into the idea of practicing law a little bit, and so I started practicing law, and that took me. I was practicing law in Massachusetts. Then I offered an opportunity down in the Virgin Islands. And went down there, and then at some point I was, as I say, my wife really wanted to leave the Virgin Islands for a lot of reasons, and I was kind of regretting that I hadn't done the journalism thing like I wanted to do. And oddly enough, there was this sort of coincidence, alignment of the planets, where the legal newspaper in Massachusetts called Lawyers Weekly was looking for an editor, and they wanted an editor who had law practice experience and journalism experience. And lo and behold, there I was.
And his first name was Robert, and his last name started with an A. And
yeah,
there you
exactly.
go.
So I went up there and became editor of that paper, and I became their editor. They expanded. They created another paper called Lawyers Weekly USA for a while. I was the editor of that. Then I ended up working with ALM in New York as well. I was the editorial director of a division there. But all along, I had very early on got an interest in tech, and in particular in sort of the web, in the early days of the web, and I was on the internet before there was a web, and I got really fascinated by the potential for the internet to offer lawyers a free or low cost alternative to very expensive things they were paying for in those days, like West and Lexis. Even though there wasn't much case law on the internet in those days, I saw opportunities for marketing, for using it for marketing, for research, for all these different things. And I just started writing about it. I started saying, "Look, lawyers, you ought to be aware of this thing called the internet." And I had a column, and that led to that newsletter you mentioned.
And of course, they swarmed to take your advice.
I figured I'd write about it for a couple of years, and nobody would get it, and that would be the end of it. And
and here you are.
Here we are.
You know that all the early web pioneers were attorneys, Well,
but they were. That's what's funny. People talk about how slow lawyers were to adopt, but you think about things like the Legal Information Institute, which I don't know how well you know that out of Cornell Law School, but they were one of the first major legal websites, right? And they actually created one of the first ever web browsers. Tom Bruce there at LII developed one of the first ever web browsers so that lawyers would be able to use their site and access their resources.
It was a huge resource back in the day.
Yeah. And another one, FindLaw, which was started by Tim Stanley and Stacy Stern, which got sold to West Publishing later, but now they run Justia, which happens to host my blog and my new legal tech directory. But they were out there, in the early 90s, putting out legal information. I mean, there was a lot of legal stuff going on in those days, surprisingly. But
interesting, because my experience, obviously, I grew up a little bit after you guys, but my experience was always, it was just basically tech geeks who were interested in discussing all kinds of stuff in music and culture and that kind of stuff, but it wasn't anything that was that had a business sense until the mid to later 90s is when I started seeing it. But
no, you're right about that, because it wasn't so much a business at that point. I mean, it was actually more about opening up the law, making it more accessible. The LII was all about free access to law. Early fine law was all about free access to law.
Right.
A lot of the law schools were working to try and put case law on the internet and statutes on the internet before anybody else was doing it.
Courts with their docket information.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it wasn't a business, and in those early days, even West and Lexus weren't on the web. You still had to go through their terminals or whatever.
Okay, so you're back in the U.S. You're doing some editing for was it a weekly, Lawyers Weekly? You said
the Lawyers Weekly was it's kind of the legal newspaper in Massachusetts, and
right, and then ALM. And did you find that when you started at ALM and Lawyers Weekly, were you thinking, oh, I am going to write about that intersection of law and technology, or was it much broader, and then at some point it started to narrow down?
Yeah, it narrowed down. I mean, I was the editor of general legal newspapers at ALM. I was actually, I mean, by the time I got to ALM, the internet stuff was happening. I mean, law.com existed, and I was actually brought on at that point. This goes way back, but law.com was like a separate business from ALM. They were commonly owned by the same investment group, but separate business. And so I was like the content. My first job at ALM was to kind of create all the content that would then go over to law.com, which ALM would then sell to law.com. That was their weird business model. So, I mean, I was, involved, and then ALM took law.com back under its roof, and then we started developing a whole bunch of different products at ALM. I mean, it was all general legal news, broad legal news. I created a 50-state news service at ALM. We had bureaus all over the country. But all that time, it's sort of a sideline. I had this interest in tech. I mean, I think it was might have even been before I went to ALM that I was already writing for Monica and Law Technology News, her WebWatch column. Which was what was that, a weekly? Was that a monthly, weekly? I don't even remember what that was.
It switched in the middle, and then it was bi-weekly for a little bit, and
I was writing for her, and I mean, I just, it was always something. The legal news was very interesting to me, and I liked being a journalist and an editor and a reporter. But the tech stuff was just always more of almost like a passion for me. I just really enjoyed it. I just enjoyed it. I just liked it.
Right. Was there ever any overlap? Did you ever get to do any really cool investigative stuff in the legal technology world? Like, I don't know what.
Right. Breaking the story
IP
beyond
spying,
just a merger.
Somebody who worked for Putin and was purloining technology behind the Iron Curtain or something. Anything?
Probably the closest I came to an investigative piece was the legal tech entrepreneur out of California who turned out to be a fraud. I did a series of articles exposing he had been sued by multiple parties for impersonating a lawyer, for stealing money from clients, but he was running this legal tech company that was getting it was the talk of the town. As a matter of fact, when I first reported my story, he was scheduled at that point to be one of the keynote speakers at Legal Tech West Coast, which they still had Legal Tech West Coast in those days.
Wow.
And that was my story came out, I think it was about 2 weeks before that. And ALM pulled him off the roster to speak because it turned out he was a complete fraud.
Wow.
And that's a story that it keeps on giving. This was several years ago now that I wrote about him, but he ended up recently getting indicted by the feds. Or I guess maybe even, did he get convicted? I forget now. I don't want to get libel myself here, so I forget wherever this stands, but he got indicted by the feds for some more fraudulent activities recently. He wrote this long book last year, claiming that he was framed for all of this, that he was actually an FBI informant, and none of this is true. But there's a whole part in the book where he talks about this legal blogger who's responsible for all of this. Right. Had this guy never written about him, none of this would have ever been become an issue.
His cover wouldn't have been blown.
His cover would not have. Yeah. Well, he didn't put it that way. I mean, he claims he was always legitimate and did nothing fraudulent. But so that was. But
the U.S. attorney disagreed.
The U.S. attorney disagreed. It's a whole. I mean, it's such a complicated story. We would need another hour to talk about it. But it was not just his legal tech stuff. He got involved in another company, and he was accused of bribing the mayor of New Haven by handing her cash at a restaurant. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Wow.
Well, that's nothing new in New Haven. Come on.
No, but for legal tech, it was good. It was a good.
It was pretty groundbreaking.
Anybody who comes from New England, Rocky, knows that New Haven was always kind of like East New York for organized crime. And even Bob Cousy was caught in New Haven making bets on games.
Yeah. Well, Cousy, I used to see Cousy. I used to be a community organizer in Western Mass in Springfield.
Yeah.
Before I went to law school.
Yeah.
When I was in college and before I went to law school, I did community organizing, and I used to hang around the neighborhood called the South End of Springfield, which was the Italian neighborhood.
Yeah. Where there just happens to be a casino now.
Right. Exactly. Where the casino is now.
Yeah.
But
and Cousy was hanging out there.
Cousy hung out at the place called the Empire Cafe. It was the where I'm
the
not
hangout
trying to
place.
associate him, but
it
was where the Italian gambling
like that meat deli in The Sopranos, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Now this whole time, were you practicing law at the same time, or you had fully made the switch to journalism?
No, I went back and forth. I've gone back and forth. I mean, I have now been practicing law for a number of years, pretty much since I left ALM, which I left
more than 3.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, but I mean, maintaining a law practice. I was practicing law in the Virgin Islands, and then when I left the Virgin Islands, I just stopped practicing for a while. And pretty much up through when I left ALM, I was working for publishing companies, and then when I left ALM, God, a long time ago now.
Right.
And I have had at least a part-time law practice ever since, but it's only part-time right now because I am all this blogging and podcasting and writing and everything else.
Time consuming, isn't it? Yeah. You and Horrigan should open up a practice, specializing in legal technology journalism, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Horrigan used to work for me. So
right.
Oh, really?
Where? I hired him into ALM.
I believe you introduced me to him back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. That's how he got hooked into all of this, because he was he wasn't a technology guy at all. He was writing about cases at ALM. I hired him into this 50s project I mentioned before, this kind of 50 state news project. He was one of our editors for that. But I'm sure you've all heard the 9/11 story with him and Monica Bay going down. But it was that was me who assigned him to go with Monica on that day. Wow. And it was his introduction to Monica that got him writing about tech, because he never wrote about tech before that.
Gotcha.
But Monica said, "Oh, you ought to do some writing for me." And
hey, quick aside, how is Monica? Have you had any contact? I know she moved out to California with her brother.
Yeah, hanging in there, I think. Yeah, hanging in there.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah,
good.
I can give you more details off camera.
Yeah. No, I just want to make sure she's doing okay. I know
she's.
I was always worried when she was out living in the wilds of Western Massachusetts. Northwestern Connecticut. That's out in the boonies. One thing when you're driving up from New York and feeling good, but as you get retired and not feeling good, I was always a little concerned about the winters out there. Can be a little rough.
Yeah, just slightly.
Yeah.
But
good.
Okay, so now you obviously we went through. You've got 80 different projects that you work on at any given time. Question: where do you get most of your sources from? Are people generally at this point approaching you with stuff? Do you still have to do a lot of digging? Like where's your source of inspiration generally coming from?
In terms of my blog, I mean, I have got so much coming at me all the time, honestly. I've got, you know, I mean, this industry, as you all know, this industry has changed so much. I mean, one of the big differences now is a lot of these tech companies have gotten a whole lot more sophisticated about PR and marketing and all of that than they used to be. So, I mean, I am getting constantly pitched by PR people to write about this or that. I do get a lot of approaches from companies that are either about to announce something or, you know, either the company's about to launch or they're about to launch a new product and they want to break it on my blog. And so I do a lot of, I get a lot of stuff coming in over the transom, I guess, as you'd say. But, you know, it's also just important to be out there. I know a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people, and I have a lot of sources who are not sort of, you know, PR or marketing people, but just people I'm in touch with in the industry.
Right. Giving you a little.
At least one person on this call has fed me a story or two over the years. And
that's a classic journalistic network, right? I mean, going back to the days of writing for a newspaper. I mean, you just make contacts in the field you're covering, and you talk to people.
You actually have to talk to people? I thought with COVID, we're done with talking to people. There's no more communications, you know, but
no, I spend way too much time on calls.
How's that been for you in terms of both personally, but also from a work perspective? I assume that a lot of your stuff was, I mean, I met you at Legal Tech a number of years ago is when we first met, but in person meeting, talking, schmoozing with people. I mean, you know, that obviously must have been hard when everything shut down.
Yeah, you know, I'm like you guys. I travel a lot usually. And honestly, I have not been on a plane since March of 2020 right now. I am about to, I'm going to go to ABA Tech Show in a week and Legal Week after that. If I survive ABA Tech Show,
you'll make it, right.
So yeah, that was strange. I think the other strange thing though was, you know, when COVID first hit, I felt like, oh boy, things are just going to really slow down for a while, right?
Right.
And just the opposite happened. You know, it was almost as if now people had all this time on their hands, so they're going to start rolling out new products like crazy and developing, you know, taking those development projects off the shelf and get working on them. And so suddenly there was just this incredible amount of activity in the legal tech world that I wasn't expecting. I mean, these have been the busiest 2 years. I can't believe it's been 2 years. These have been the busiest 2 years I've ever had. And then on top of that, I just got involved in a bunch of projects like one of the Litera recruited me to be part of they did this Litera TV thing for a year or so, where they were doing weekly TV shows. You know, once a week I just get on record a interview. I think Tom, you did one of those, I think, with me.
Yeah.
And you know, just things like that people started doing to kind of fill in these empty spaces, I think. And so it was
why we started
busy time. Yeah.
Same we started right after COVID started. We said people aren't getting together, and you know, especially people entering into the business and any side of the business where you're not going to have those opportunities to meet people in the hallways, get to know them, you know, hear their history, hear, you know, people who've been in the industry for 15, 20 years or more. And really a lot of people are losing out because of it. I mean, it's giving a lot of people a lot of opportunities to you know, get a lot of work done. But in terms of that personal connection, that was the goal of ours, was just to introduce people to the dignitaries, to the, you know, luminaries, to the people in our industry who've made it, who've been there since the start, and encourage them to follow in the paths that have been set up. So yeah, it's been fascinating. But speaking of launching new products,
Yeah.
you just launched a new product, right?
We did launch a new product, the Law Next Legal Technology Directory,
Yeah.
which people can find at directory.lawnext.com. Yeah, no, we, this has been kind of a long in the making project, but for given how much I have written about companies over the years, at some point I started thinking, I need to organize all this better. I've got all this intelligence basically that I've created around different companies and products. And what if I tried to put that all into a directory of some kind? And my initial plan was fairly modest, but first of all, I've been working a lot with my son, Ben Ambrogi, over the last couple of years on various things. He's been helping me make more of a business out of some of the things I do here. And then I connected with the folks at Justia, who I mentioned before, who I've known forever and ever. They run not only a major legal website, Justia.com is one of the most highly trafficked legal websites in the world, but they also run a Justia legal lawyers directory, which is probably the largest legal attorney directory in the world, one of them. And they said, well, let us help you kind of develop this and do something a little more robust than just something on your blog. And we started looking at what was out there and decided that, there are other legal directories out there, but they tend to be very shallow. They might list companies, but have a paragraph description, if that, or a sentence description. They tend to be very broad and shallow. And we thought, well, maybe we can go a little more deeper on some of these companies by combining some of the content I've developed, by getting them to contribute, getting the companies to contribute various kinds of content about themselves, and drawing on some third-party sources. So that's essentially what we've done. I mean, it just launched last week. It's kind of a it's a version 1.0, and I'm learning, after writing about startups for many years, I'm learning what it's like to try and have one, and it's a lot of work. And we've already started working. Yeah, it's already started working on version 2.0. So
the way that you actually have it, categorized and the ability to drill down by the different areas of interest has been great. I've been on it 2-3 times in the last week.
Oh, thanks.
Actually pulling some information about different things. It's been really, it's anyone who hasn't been on it yet, absolutely you should be checking it out, because it's been a great resource already. So
I appreciate that.
I love the fact that there's screenshots there's the blurbs, there's all kinds of information there. It's great. So and what was that like working with your son?
Oh, it's been great working with my son. I mean, as I say, he actually started a few years ago when I decided to quit that other podcast that you guys mentioned in the intro, the Lawyer to Lawyer, and I decided to start a new podcast. That must have been 2019. I think I did that. And so he was already doing production work on other people's podcasts. He has a little company where he does podcasts for people. So we started working on that, and then he was the one who was kind of saying, you could be doing a little better here in terms of advertising and sponsorships and all that. And said, really? Because I am not a salesperson. One thing I am not is a salesperson, and I've never had any interest in being a salesperson. And he's a salesperson. He can do that. So that's awesome. That's been a lot of fun. I mean, it's just so rewarding to be able to work with my son. It's at times it's a little strains our relationship a little bit, frankly, and puts us in a different pairing with each other than just the typical parent relationship.
Parent-child,
what could be better than working with your son?
How old is he, Bob?
He's an old man. He's 31 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I have another son who has no interest
in any of this.
Right. So in all the stuff that you've written over the last couple of years, what have you seen that was like, oh man, this is really cool, but then it still hasn't kicked in yet? What do you see as like something that like the industry just really needs to grab a hold of this, but it just hasn't gotten there yet. Is there anything that you put in that bucket?
Well, that's a tough question, because so much of what I see is pretty much incremental in a sense. It's building on stuff. I mean, I think it's really interesting, especially talking to two guys in the e-discovery world, that I've always felt that the e-discovery world has been so far ahead of the rest of the industry in terms of technology. And Rocky, you may not know this, but Tom would know. I used to do a lot of work with Catalyst, which is a e-discovery company that got acquired by OpenText and no longer exists. But when they were Catalyst, I was very much involved with them as a consultant with them. And of course, now John Tredenick is back with another product, Merlin, and as a matter of fact, he's in our Startup Alley next week.
Yeah, I saw that.
One of the contenders in our Startup Alley.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so, so many things that people come out saying, "Oh, this is new and wonderful and fabulous." It's like, we've seen that before. It ain't
Right.
all that.
Been there,
It's a
done
new
that.
iteration of it. I do think that some of the automation stuff is getting underappreciated and hasn't been as widely adopted as I would have thought. And by that, some of it is process automation. But then I think one of the most fascinating products over the last couple of years has been from Casetext, a legal research company, which has this product called Compose, which effectively will write your briefs for you. And it sounds fantastical when they say that.
Right.
And it is to an extent. I mean, it doesn't literally write your brief, but it literally writes the first draft of your brief and
Right.
does it in a lucid and cohesive way and helps you create an organization and a structure around a brief. And that's a pretty dramatic, development. I mean, people have always said, I'm worried about AI taking away our job. Here's a situation where a legal technology product really can do partly, at least, the work of a lawyer.
Right.
And so I think those kinds of products that can literally automate the brain work, not just the process work of a lawyer, we're starting to see more of those, and their adoption has still been pretty slow, I think.
Yeah. I think people are worried, and I was always involved in the analytics side of things from a technology standpoint. People are always worried about, the computers are going to take over, they're going to, get me out of a job. And what I've always said, and what I've seen in practice, is that every single time that we've had these types of technologies, like even brief writing, right? It's not going to eliminate the need for the attorney to edit it, figure it out, go over it. Even let's say it's near perfect, right? The attorney still has to go over it, which just means that now, instead of taking a week to write a brief, you now have time to write 18 briefs in a week, and it can just get you more business, because there's plenty of business going around. If you utilize the technology right, it doesn't eliminate you from the job. It just makes you more productive and efficient.
Right.
So
that's the key.
I think your point about incrementalism is well taken, though, Bob. We, in the e-discovery world, particularly, I hearken back to the days of knowledge management, when we had these big data sets inside law firms and people were trying to churn through them and search them and analyze them. And, those KM guys were way ahead of the curve and very often not respected at their firms. They were, they were kind of the gyro gear loose guy down the hallway. But,
right.
People like Ron Friedman or Peter Krakauer were doing this sort of thing 15, 16 years ago, and unsung heroes doing it. And so, I think that's true. Nothing just pops out onto the horizon. Technology builds on technology, and we move forward incrementally. I think it was Monty Ahalt. I don't know if you remember Monty, was a judge down in Maryland. He worked with Jim Kane on some early technology, and he said, we're the only profession that practices by looking in the rear view mirror. right? We want to look at things that
Everything
came
from
before us. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Well, even I mean, even artificial intelligence, which again, we were
Oh, God.
using AI in the e-discovery world well before it became ubiquitous in every other aspect of law to some extent. And then I was just talking to Doug Austin recently. I think you guys had Doug on your show recently. Probably, I don't know if you're talking about they just did the State of e-discovery report, talking about the fact that there's, we still haven't really fully embraced, TAR or whatever you want to call it in the e-discovery world, let alone in the broader legal world.
Yep.
So I think, Tom, unless you've got another question up your sleeve right now, but I think we're going to start heading towards the finish line here with this one, unfortunately.
I think the only thing I want to know is, now that it's spring, even though things are slowing down in the baseball world, how the Red Sox looking this year?
I'm not responding. Don't even ask me about that. I don't know. The whole routine with the Red Sox is they build you up just to let you down.
Kind of like the Orioles.
Spoken like a true New Englander. 200 years of frustration. Hope springs eternal in the spring, and then comes September.
Yeah. Well, if you make it to September with the Sox, but yeah.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, I've got a couple quick questions for you, Bob. You ready?
All right.
So the first one's a nice and easy one. Chicago or New York style pizza?
Oh, New York. Well, I would say New Haven, actually. Just to
New
harken
Haven.
back to what we were talking about.
Okay. What's your favorite movie to quote? Not your favorite movie, but your favorite movie to quote.
Man, quote a movie. Have I ever quoted a movie?
Really?
Yeah, there you go.
Probably, I'm probably going to go back to Casablanca, because that line about this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, or whatever that line was.
Yeah,
is
Louis,
that,
this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a great movie.
Yeah.
Great movie. One of my top 5. I have a good friend here in New Orleans. He's in Baton Rouge, actually, but we argue all the time about the best movies. He's a real movie follower, as is my son. And Casablanca is always in my top 5.
On the top 5. Yeah.
Fabulous movie. Yeah.
Okay. Favorite book?
I have never gotten over my Hemingway infatuation. I mean, I was like I think I mentioned earlier, I just kind of wanted to be Hemingway when I grew up. So probably A Farewell to Arms of his books. It's my favorite book. Yeah.
I saw a great quote from Hemingway the other day when people were making such a big deal about the old man on the sea, the old man and the sea. And he said, hey, the fish is just a fish. The boat is just a boat, right? The guy's an old fisherman. Don't read all this
no
stuff.
Symbolism.
Read the friggin' book.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And as Tom O'Connor once said, a cigar is just a cigar.
That's right. That's right.
I've heard Tom say that. No. Okay, and then the last one is, as a technology enthusiast, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Nope.
I'm Star Trek. Yeah.
Star Trek?
Do I have to explain it? Yeah.
Star Trek.
Yeah.
No, but which Star Trek? Star Trek? Star Trek: The New Generation? Star Trek: Farpoint?
Right.
Star Trek. Yeah.
Then I get into aging myself again. But
yeah, right.
It's like it's like the original is always the best, and somehow in my mind.
Yep. I hear you, Tom.
Well, I have one question in that vein, Bob. The vein that Rocky has been mining. Beatles or Stones?
Oh, Stones.
There we go.
Tom gets a win. Look at that.
The best blues band ever.
We are in the minority, Robert, and you are one of like 3 other people who has said that.
Yep.
I haven't even been able to make it through that whole long Beatles. Have you watched any of that documentary thing?
I did. I mean, if you're a true Beatles fan, I'm sure it's heaven. To me, it was very interesting to see the creative process, how when they actually got to some pieces where they were writing a song or working with each other,
Right.
The best was, I think I've said this before, but McCartney, they were sitting around waiting for Lennon to show up one morning. McCartney is strumming on his bass like it's a guitar, and he's like, and George Harrison comes over and sits near him and starts strumming some chords. And all of a sudden, McCartney, you hear him say, "Get back, get back."
Yeah.
And he had just like written, "Get back."
Yeah.
Right.
And then Ringo comes over and starts like hitting his legs, like tapping out a drum. And I'm thinking, my God, these guys just wrote one of the greatest songs in rock and roll history while they're waiting for the fourth guy in the band to show up.
And my wife's immediate question was, so why do Lennon and McCartney get credit for the song when you see that John Lennon wasn't even there?
Right. And
that's the way it is. That's the way it rolls.
Yeah. I have a quick Rolling Stone story, which relates to my son, which ties it all together here, which is in 1989, which was the year my son was born. That was the Steel Wheels tour, the Rolling Stones, I think it was. Was that Steel Wheels? And I had bought like amazing tickets down at Foxborough, down at the Pats Stadium to see them. And I had 4 tickets, and I invited my wife, and I had invited this other couple. We had lined up the limo to take us down there. We were going to drink up a storm, and we were going to have a grand old time. But my wife was pregnant. And as it turned out, she decided to go into labor on the night before that concert.
So tell me you went to the show.
I had a decision to make.
I was going to say, so was she upset when you got to the hospital later?
Yeah, honey, they were great.
Well, I chose the hospital, and
of course.
So I called my friends and I said, "You're not going to believe this, but you've got a limo and you've got 2 extra tickets to give to somebody because I can't make it."
Right.
Like Goodwill Hunting, right? I got to go see about a girl.
Yeah.
So there's a movie you can quote, Bob, which is directly related to an incident in your life.
Right, there you go.
Good.
I saw the Stones. The first time I ever saw the Stones was in the old Boston Garden. And it was this, you probably remember this, Bob, when Kevin White had to get them out. They've been arrested by like the Rhode Island State Police or something, speeding on the way to the show in their limos.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, I think they had played in Providence the night before, something. Anyways, they get in the limos and they're all speeding up to Boston about, warp 4, and they get stopped by either the Rhode Island State Police or maybe the Mass State Police. They all get pulled over, like 10 limos.
Convoy, right?
Yeah, and it's like an hour to showtime. And somehow Kevin White got involved. He was the mayor of Boston, Rocky. They called him His Honor. Very imperious, patrician sort of guy.
Brahmin.
Boston Brahmin. And somehow Kevin got involved and I believe went down to where they were being, stopped and grabbed them and took off. So, hey, last question, Bob. Enough for this trip down memory. Now you see why we booked an hour and a half.
Yeah, I see. Okay, sorry.
If you could spend a day with anybody from our profession, living or dead, who would it be and what would you do?
So define our profession. Because as I told you, I'm a journalist, I'm a tech guy.
Well, there you go. No, it's your take. You can go from Jimmy Breslin to Sir Isaac Newton to your take.
Yeah. Boy, that's just so hard. And I know you even gave me a warning, and I still can't even still not even sure I can think about it. But I want to go. I want to ride along with Hunter S. Thompson on his ride to Las Vegas when he did Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good one.
The probably one of the most distinctive journalists, quote unquote, of all time, and one of that book is one of the most amazing books of all time, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So I will choose a road trip with Hunter S. Thompson.
There you go. That is a
That would
great
be
answer.
Legendary, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Good call. Good call. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, thanks so much for being with us. Always great chatting with you, of course. We tried to recreate these things, what it would be like running into friends at the hall of a show and having a conversation. And then other people would come by and say, oh, is that Bob Ambrogi? Blah, blah, blah. And I think we've very well succeeded in this one.
Yeah. Well, it was
capture
a lot
the
of fun.
essence of what.
It was almost like seeing
we'll,
people in person.
Hopefully we'll be able to actually do it in person in 2 weeks. So
yes,
yeah.
I won't make it to the ABA Tech Show, unfortunately, this year. But I am going to be at Legal Tech. So I'm looking forward to seeing you, and we'll have some conversations there. And everybody in the audience, I'm looking forward to seeing you down at the corner of Rampart and Dumaine for Mardi Gras. Come on down, and as a great songwriter and singer, Professor Longhair said, if you come to New Orleans, you got to see the Mardi Gras. So till next time in the eDiscovery channel, thanks and goodbye.